I love the fact that you say a second bite at the apple and not a second kick at the cat, which I still haven't checked the etymology. I will never believe that the expression was ever two kicks at the cat, but like as if when you want to kick a cat away the first time it doesn't work, so that it comes back and you kick it a second time. It came from a kid's game of kicking a can. But Dark Crypto is trying to get to you both. I will message him. I don't know what it's about, people, and there's no promises, but I'll definitely message him because I think we're connected on the Twitterverse. What was I about to say? No, hold on, Robert. There was one more that I wanted to get to, which was a question for Barnes. Oh yeah, here. Question for Barnes from Tails. Have you ever seen a case where the prosecution has been so close to triggering a mistrial so many times in such a prominent case?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So
That's not new at all. That's commonplace. And like,
this is the funny thing is like we're all seeing it. By the way, this is not an endorsement because I understand now on Twitter apparently if you endorse Kyle, you can get your tweets removed. Thank you, WP Zai, for the super chat. Robert, what was I just about to say? I just lost my train of thought. Have you ever seen? Oh
about
yes,
high profile cases.
yes. Well, and the funny thing is, I said it, during the stream today with Ricada. We're all seeing this, and it's shocking because it's the first time we've ever seen it. This is the first really high-profile case in a while where we're seeing it. I presume, Robert, I have no direct experience, but I'm just going to make an assumption based on the 100% success rate of corruption in a high-profile case. This happens all the time, and you take even lower level, less politicized, less interesting cases. This just happens through and through, and we're just seeing it. And now we're just going to make the wrong conclusion that this only happens in high profile cases. This case is only high profile because the general public made it high profile. I presume
Right.
this happens all the time.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong,
And
but I know I'm not.
usually worse in lower profile cases. It always in every political case I've ever had. Now I know for like Emily Baker, state prosecutor, longstanding California, for her she's shocked by this, and that's because your old school, ethical, run of the mill, straightforward, completely apolitical case. Those cases rare are much less common that you see it. It's in a lot of the cases that I'm involved with. The only reason they're there is because of corruption at some level of the process, whether it's the judge, whether it's the prosecutor, whether it's the law enforcement agent, whether it's some politician that demanded it go forward. At some level, corruption took place. And it doesn't mean like quid pro quo monetary corruption. It just means somebody not following the ethical duties to do justice and only comply with the rules, the constitutional rules and legal rules that apply to criminal investigations and prosecutions. And the same with a good number of civil cases that I handle. I mean, they're almost all of my cases are political. It's pretty rare they're not. I mean, it's just the nature of my practice. And so I witness it a lot more often, probably, than most defense lawyers, and have studied the long history of them. So I've been studying criminal cases of this kind going back 200 years. Patrick Henry defended one of the first great political cases. Though his victory, he made it more political maybe than the prosecution did, but the whole goal was to really wipe out tobacco farmers unless they, conceded to the state entirely. And, his give me liberty or give me death. And only that was back when juries could control sentencing and only issued $1. The lowest possible fine was what the remedy was there. But cases have always been political. The play Chicago, which has been made into a movie many times over, it's all about the political nature of court cases. It's inescapable. It's inevitable. And it's a popular subject of film and Broadway and books and TV series for that precise reason. And once you experience it enough, it's pretty. You're ready for it. You're prepared for it. You understand it, and you have to prepare for it, and you have to figure out, strategically how you're going to address it, how you're going to go at it, so on and so forth. And I think the defense here just hasn't done the job they could have done and should have done because the resources were made available for them to do this.
Well,
If
Robert,
you're going to block everybody and say everybody else out, by golly, you better deliver, and they did not.
one thing is clear. They did not do the job that you quite clearly could have done because you're saying things now. This is not, well, it's not wizardry. It might be wizardry of intellect, but this is not stuff that they did, and we know it because they didn't do it. You're saying it, and you are maybe the first person to say it, but you're definitely saying it, and it was not done. So they could have done it, but they didn't. Why not? Who knows? Serious question: does R. Barnes ever sleep? And bringing up my boomer moment, Robert. I never realized I could adjust your mic on my end. I mean, holy crab apples! How's the audio now, people? Now I know I can adjust both my. It's only been 2 years, Robert. Okay, no, it's terrible because it's not to play Monday morning quarterback, backseat driver, whatever it is. These are not even things that I would have ever thought of. And these are things that clearly you have already thought of, which were made available. And it's not a question of glory hogging. It's just a question of the pursuit of justice.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I was more than willing to let them take all of the credit, all of the credit. And but what I was not willing to do was stay silent when they refused to allow anyone to help. And I mean anyone. I mean, Andrew Bronca, law of self-defense, he was willing to consult on the case. I'm the one who reached out to him. I said he needed to be a critical consultant on this process all the way through, help prep for opening statements, closing arguments, thematic strategies, legal issues. The guy wrote literally the book Law of Self-Defense.
well,
They
and
refused his help.
I was gonna just stop you to let you know, everyone know who was watching Ricada today. Andrew, what's his first name? It's Bronca's
Andrew
last name.
Andrew
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 Bronca,
Bronca.
Branca, who literally is LSOD, LOSD, Law of Self Defense. It's got a channel. Seems to be
He
a very
wrote
success.
the leading book on the law of
Yeah,
self-defense,
and
titled The Law of Self-Defense.
I'm not saying this as though success is the indicator of authority, or that authority, sorry, is the indicator. Which way do I mean this? I'm not saying this as though his success is an indication of his authority. His authority is is defined by his success, because obviously you don't get good at what you're doing if you're not good at what you're doing. He's
Yeah.
gotten good at what he's doing, and I did not
I
know
think
that,
he's
Robert, until
done
you
it
mentioned it
for
now.
it's almost all he's done for 25 years. I mean, this is, as he points out, it's not practical for an individual criminal defense lawyer to focus on law of self-defense because it's maybe one or two cases a year. So, and usually smaller scale cases, and usually not clean self-defense arguments. So when you got somebody that's all he does, consult on just the use of force and law of self-defense, uh, and you refuse to use them, you refuse to listen to them. I'm sorry, that's not doing your job. And again, if you're going to do that, okay, but by golly, you better perform. And they didn't. I mean, and now we're seeing the consequences. And hopefully, the jury still comes to their senses, and the facts are still overwhelming enough that we get acquittals. But the kids now at risk, and I think what you saw today was some panic by the defense that holy cow, this is not going. And I have reason to believe that David Hancock, at least, thought this would be a no-brainer case and just wouldn't listen to the idea that all David Hancock cared about was money, 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 money. And I kept saying, we need to focus on the kid winning. I said, I only care about the kid winning. And so the quid pro quo was, I'll help you raise money. You help me help the kid win, and make sure that doesn't get shut out. And then they did shut it out after they raised the money and pocketed it. And now they put the kid at risk. And so it's just inexcusable, inexcusable.
That might be an audio bite to clip so that people can know what's going on here. And I want to bring this one up. Will be miffed. That's the joke. But do they get to seek defamation damages later only if Kyle gets a full acquittal? Can they also seek defamation damages when a mistrial with prejudice happens? Defense seeking money later. So, well, Robert, let me see if my knowledge of American law is good. Conviction, no defamation. Just
Correct.
so I think that goes without saying. The mistrial without prejudice, I do wonder, would that preclude any meaningful defamation against
It wouldn't
anybody?
preclude it. No, because it's the same as a legal acquittal. Mistrial with a prejudice, any dismissal with prejudice is in law in Wisconsin and around the country legal acquittal, because this came up in the Amy Cooper case. That dismissal was with prejudice, no diversion, with prejudice. That means it's legally equal to an acquittal.
Okay. It's strange to see BLM and the left advocate for such prosecutorial tactics that they argue unjustly incarcerates a disproportionate number of minorities. Well, no one accused those entities of being morally or politically consistent.
I
And
mean, to their credit, some have. Glenn Greenwald has been very consistent about his criticism of this case. So has Alan Dershowitz.
yeah, well, I'm sure a few of them are, but Glenn Greenwald
Yeah, but
is
most have
public,
not.
and
Most have not.
No, but Greenwald is public enemy number one as well with the left now, so as is Dershowitz. It's like the second you call it out, you're public enemy number one. But it is very funny. Just coming back to this, the idea of showing voter ID is racist, and yet vaccination passports are not. It's what happens when you have no principles. Is you have no principles and you have no consistency in your ideologies at any point in time. It's not because you believe them vigorously on one issue and then contradict them vigorously on another that they still make sense. No morals equals no morals, but that's a separate issue. Do you think the defense team is watching this? I sure hope so. One thing's for certain: spread this so far and wide they can't ignore it. It's not a question. Do not solicit, do not harass. Spread it so far and wide it becomes unavoidable, not just for the defense team, not just for Kyle Rittenhouse, not just for Wendy Rittenhouse, but for the world at large, and for, I would say, I presume the jury members are not watching this, so they won't see this.
It's educational and informative for people in future circumstances. If you face like circumstances in the future, learn from these experiences so that you become better equipped. Self-education is the first step to self-empowerment. And that's the whole reason this channel exists, is to give that opportunity. Well, the show exists. I shouldn't speak.
Don't worry, Robert. I'm not sensitive like that. You're right. The reason why this took off, the reason why this entity took off, my channel, but not just my channel, the lawverse as a whole, is because it's so, I was going to say knowledge is power, and it's a cliche.
It is. So you can't get. There's a reason why most dictators kept people illiterate for as long as they could. It's because self-education is critical to self-empowerment. The more you know, the more power you have. Because at the end of the day, the system can't exist without your compliance with it. If you're able to meaningfully and intelligently and informatively push back, you change the power equation entirely. And never underestimate your own ability or capacity to change the world. Your self-education matters. Every person who is more self-educated is more self-empowered, and that changes the entire balance of power. And that's the only way the balance of power has ever changed in the history of the world.
And I'm going to tell you this. I didn't hear what you just said for the last 10 seconds, Robert, but I can imagine what you said because I think I know what you said nonetheless. Someone sent me this. Let me just make sure I get it here. There can be no tyrants where there are no slaves. Jose Rizal, who is a Filipino, I don't want to say revolutionary, but very well known. And I said, and it was funny, I had it in the background. I said I was going to put it up on the wall, but I wasn't convinced I agreed with it. And now if I can abstract from the top level view is, okay, no tyrants, no slaves, no tyrants, fine. But typically, nobody makes themselves a slave voluntarily, and tyrants make slaves. So I wasn't sure I agreed with it, but now I understand the deeper meaning that ignorance creates the slave of sorts, and which is what the tyrants want to do. And it's a beautiful way you have of phrasing it. By the way, who I know who sent me that shirt. Thank you very much, by the way. But it's a beautiful thing. It's like, yes, it's illiteracy in another era, and then it's social media and media illiteracy in the modern era. And be media illiterate and think that the PolitiFact fact check is truth. You are effectively illiterate, but not in the sense that you can't read words on a page. You can't understand facts and lies on a page, which is a very different type of literacy, but literacy nonetheless. Holy cows. Where do we go from here, Robert? What were the other, hold on. What were the other issues? I took some notes down here. Oh, the drone footage. Oh my goodness. Thank goodness I take notes because I have no memory anymore. The drone footage, Robert. What's the deal? Let's start with the dropping off of the file of the drone with the prosecution. Do you know details on how they acquired that drone footage in the first place?
So it was made. I was made aware last summer that on Tucker Carlson, some video drone footage had been shown that led the defense team to believe there must be FBI drone footage. And that's what, and my understanding was that the defense team, and Mark Richards put on the record today, that they had located who Tucker identified who it was and the name of the company. The thing was that company had disappeared. I mean, within 2 weeks after the incident, that company vanished.
If I can stop you there, 2 weeks, they disappeared 2 weeks of the event occurring, or 2 weeks of the footage being delivered?
2 weeks after the event occurred. So
Okay.
their footage gets aired a couple of days after the incident on Tucker Carlson. The name of the company and the individual who takes credit for that footage is listed on it. But then when you try to find who that company is, the company had dissolved 2 weeks after August 2020. So they tracked down who the individual purported to be. The investigator talked to him, and they said, "Oh no, we that's not our footage. That's some sort of mistake." Now the defense, I guess, my understanding was the defense followed up from there. It's not apparent. They told me that they did. I don't know whether they did or they didn't. But what happened is that drone footage, to my knowledge, John Pierce never had that drone footage. The defense never had it. So there's no chance. I mean, unless David Hancock had it and he somehow is connected to this, to my knowledge, nobody had it on the defense team. I know Mark Richards didn't have it. And so then they finally disclosed that there is FBI drone footage, but it's a little bit different than what was shown on Tucker. And then the question was, well, where's the HD version of the FBI footage? The prosecution was late in disclosing the existence of the FBI drone footage, and then the FBI claimed, we lost the HD version. We don't know where it happened. So
That's laughably implausible. But I just want to say that laughably implausible. You have to. Let me be more direct. You have to be an idiot to believe that, and the only idiots in a non-judgmental way, but you just believe what CNN says, would be CNN viewers. It's laughably implausible. It's not just implausible in the sense that it happened. It's difficult to make that happen because most people think they've deleted things successfully, and they never have. And as lawyers, we know that. But sorry.
exactly.
So carry on.
And then, so
Robert.
middle of the trial, somebody walks into the prosecutor's office and says they have some video footage, but they wish to remain anonymous. Prosecutors get that footage and then want to introduce it into evidence. They share what they claim is their only copy of the footage with the defense. The defense kind of objects, but doesn't object as fully as they should have because there was no foundation for this. You don't get to drop off anonymously some footage and claim it's an authentic representation, accurate representation of the events. You don't know how it's been edited. You don't know anything about that. And so, in my view, they should have objected on foundation grounds, but the defense has waived every objection to foundation throughout this entire trial on video evidence, and leading to all kinds of adverse evidentiary effects for Kyle. Then but they did object to the lateness of it. Then it comes out during the charging conference when they're wanting the provocation instruction. They say they're going to rely on this footage. The defense puts in their footage, and the problem is it's very blurry. And the prosecutor, Krause, Sauer Krause, as I like to call him, puts out, he says, we have a better copy of that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the defense lawyers like Wisco, who's an associate of Mark Richards, says, hold on a second. She did, by the way, a very good job today laying this out for the court. Said, hold on a second. What do you mean? This is the only copy we have. What do you mean you have a better version? And it came out later that night and over the weekend that the HD high definition resolution of the video had never been produced or provided to the defense. That added to the Monday motion to dismiss with prejudice, and was the sole basis for the motion for mistrial without prejudice this afternoon, because the concern was this video, which they never got to see during trial, didn't get to prepare for, didn't get to have their own expert testimony to impeach or to refute or to rebut or to utilize in their own benefit, is now being highlighted by the jury, and the jury's wanting to see it on a big screen in the courtroom, and which led to the mistrial motion. But so it's another example, and their excuse was not a credible excuse. Their excuse was, somehow it just magically condensed, and they only got the condensed non-HD version. It must be because they have an Android phone, Your Honor. That was not a credible explanation.
Robert, what at the risk of crashing the stream? Hold on, I think someone just said it right here. I was going to ask. Here we go. At the this guy, I don't know who you are, but I noticed you. I only brought up the one that did not have the insult that was in a previous comment. Handbrake. Robert, do you know what handbrake is?
Here's another thing I've never seen before. When I present digital evidence into trial, I actually use an expert. I'd recommended that for them in this case too, for the defense. You bring in. I work with a guy who's great. Jacques is fantastic. He does fantastic work. He done it for many of my cases. I mean, just brilliant. He just moves like this. There are no hitches. There are no technological glitches or delays. It's just boom, 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 because he's a professional. All he does is take evidence, put it in video presentation. He can also help you with opening statement, closing argument, putting the video together, etc. But he's like a paralegal, and he can do it for both sides, so that you can make sure it's competent, capable, and there's no contamination. Like if my guy had been used for this case, the prosecution likely would have gone along with him because he's so much better than anybody they have. You know what he would have found? He would have said, "Hey Barnes, there's an HD version of this that the prosecution has." He would have found it right away. That's the problem with not being tech savvy in the courtroom. And so but they didn't they didn't have that aspect. But the other reason you do that is so you don't use your own laptop to broadcast evidence to the jury, because
God
then it's
damn it.
broadcast to the world,
Yep.
which is what the nitwit prosecutors did. So you can see their screen, you can see how they organize their exhibits, and included on his state exhibit screen were actually two different Handbrake was one, I forget the name of the other, two different apps whose sole goal is to do the kind of thing that he claimed he wasn't involved in this case.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you one thing. I know on my personal laptop, I have nothing that would be incriminating. I have one client file on the screen that, even though that's still public information, I would not want people knowing that. I don't want people drawing the connection. This dude, I mean, it was Krause's computer where he didn't think it through in any sense. But the question is, Robert, so the internet is the infinite knowledge of God, and God in the lower G sense, not the capital G. They are just, you got a million people out there, and they will confer and they will dig and they will get the truth. So it's a form of godness. People are pulling it up. How do you get it to the judge? Does it get to the judge? Does it get to the defense team? How do you get the people who need to know right now? Because they're living in a bubble. They're living in a
It's
vacuum.
just
How do you
it's
get it?
broadcasting it, broadcasting it, broadcasting it. Because Richard's closing argument was much better than it likely would have otherwise been. Whatever its faults or weaknesses or limitations, it was still very, very good for Richards. That's just a different standard. But is because of all the collective effort over the weekend in the court of public opinion, that stuff got to people. So people think I have direct access. I do not. I've been shut out entirely. But anyone else can get that information. And if someone like Jack Posobiec shares it, if people like that share it, chances are the defense team is going to get it. I mean, Jack has 1.5 million
Yeah,
followers.
I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't fully appreciate that. I actually I knew Jack is big. Jack puts out the good information. Jack has sources that he does not divulge or disclose, and he's been very good. 1.5
And
million
he publicly
followers.
confirmed, like people were saying I was making stuff up about the jury. Jack publicly confirmed the exact same thing, that he is independently hearing from his independent sources connected to the courthouse the exact same thing that I was reporting about the jury.
Oh, so
It's
here's a good question, Das Goose, and I'll tell you my layperson interpretation. Then Barnes will give me the actual answer. Dasku says, what does the prosecution gain by lying about the HD footage from the drone? I can't see anything from it to favor them. And I've flown drones for the military for 12 years. So here's the thing. I've flown drones now for, I would say, close to a decade. No, it's not a decade. 5 years. I've flown every drone from the Phantom 1 to the Phantom whatever with the Spark. And um, what they gain by this is that they took an HD, they had an HD, they had the actual, just a higher quality version of the video. They communicated to the defense a lower quality video, which they then submitted as evidence, sought to enhance, which brings you back to square one, but plus crap. And then said this proves provocation, where the original HD version, from what we've seen, doesn't really seem to prove that, but they created the ambiguity through the crappiness of the video footage, which resulted from the lower quality, then enhancing it to the higher quality. That's the only the
I
net.
mean, that was the advantage was twofold. One was their ability to manipulate the lower quality footage to claim something that what didn't exist in the higher quality footage, but also it allowed them, denied the defense the utility of the higher quality footage during the trial, that they of things that would have helped them. So it was both. They could manipulate the video footage easier if they didn't disclose the high definition version to the defense or the higher quality version to the defense, and they could preclude the defense from spotlighting or highlighting during trial evidence that would have been favorable to the defense from the higher quality version.
And I'm going to bring this up, not because I want to encourage the idea that I didn't bring it up on the alleged first 2 times. I didn't see it. Stephen Oglesby says, third time maybe, in a new trial, can Kyle ditch Hancock and get a new legal team? I mean, I
He
know the
absolutely
answer, but
should.
Robert, okay.
That's a no-brainer. That's an absolute. Whatever doubts may have been present are now resolved. Hopefully again he gets acquittals and he can just move on. But the warnings that I made and that others made about this team all came to fruition during trial and were independently confirmed by a wide range of people separate from me. You can watch the Ricada live streams daily and see a wide range of lawyers from across the spectrum keep saying how bad this is by the defense.
And
Mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake.
and the thing is this, like on Ricada's stream, I would say it's unanimous, and I would say it's unanimous not to
Oh
prove the authority, but to prove the objectivity, because between Legal Bites, Alita, between Legal Mindset, Andrew, between Joe Neerman, Good Logic, Eric Hunley, who's not a lawyer but has a great channel, check him out. Between Uncivil Law, Kurt, you had Andrew. Oh my God, I
Bronco.
forgot his last name. Bronco, Andrew Bronco. You had Hogg's Law, Hoeg. You had Nate Brody.
Lawyer.
Everybody, everybody is in agreement, and they are of all walks of life, politically speaking. So at this point, it's objective. Period. The only thing that makes it subjective is what your financial and media interests are, and which is why you see fact checks confirming garbage crap facts and mainstream media promoting garbage facts narratives. It's objective, and then you realize that people just don't even know certain basic facts of the case. 2 weeks after the trial, they don't know because the media doesn't report it, and then they have the big tech oligarchs, censoring or soft censoring. You can still make a video about it. It won't be monetizable, and we won't promote it because it's not monetized. And that's the circle jerk of economy for big tech. Oh, it's not monetized. Well, why would we promote it? Because we're not going to make money off of it. So we demonetize that which we don't like, so that we don't have to promote that which we don't like. It's the circle jerk of political economics. I like that. I like that. Too big for a shirt, but that's it. And so you see people now, not knowing because of this, but a lot of people discovering it despite that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's there for people to see. Anybody that's continuing to defend the defense team is just sticking their head in the sand or is part of the defense, part of
Well,
the Hancock or related defense team.
I,
There's
I, I
no
just
objective definite. Not a single lawyer on that panel or any lawyer that I know would ever recommend either of these lawyers, but definitely not Richards, ever be hired as lead counsel for any kind of case. That's just from what they've witnessed. That's the reality of it. Definitely not for Kyle's case.
I thought that was a middle finger, but it's an actual pointing up. So that's a good sign. And the other one, not such a good sign. My kid burnt his middle finger on a glue gun yesterday, and he's like, I got hurt here, but it was that's my ring finger. Just my ring is there. The only footage that is 100% forensically sound is that in the raw file format MP3 movie it's set are all already compressed and have lost important data. True, but there's losing important data and there's losing critical data during the stream today. And God bless the community that Ricada has. People put up the low res image and the high res image, and then zoomed in on a spot to show the difference. I mean, it's the difference between seeing handles on doors of cars versus not seeing individual humans because they've gone full Back to the Future, dissolved into future. So it's amazing, but this is why I'm thoroughly convinced the powers that be do not want the aggregate knowledge of the internet inspecting and scrutinizing the biggest decisions of government and the police.
No doubt about it.
Has anyone reached out to?
I did, but he was stepping back until the trial, and he'll continue to step back for a while. But I mean, I get that. Yes, I think the senator at some point needs to be involved.
And I just want to bring this up because, Like a Boss, I love this cup. It was a Father's Day present. Lonely Island, people. Like a Boss is one of the greatest songs.
I used to have a sweatshirt that said that.
Was it Lonely Island or before Lonely Island, Robert? That's the question.
I have no idea. I didn't know it had any correlation to Lonely Island. I don't know what that is.
Okay. As he sips from his InfoWars mug, yes, that shows our Robert, you're 44 years old, correct?
How old?
44?
47.
40. Okay, so a little bit. So we're generationally separated. Lonely Island is the greatest fake rap band of all time. It's Andy
Oh,
Samberg and the boys from
oh,
SNL.
I recognize Sandberg.
No, and I'm not. I was saying
He
that
was on.
tongue in cheek.
He sings. I'm on a boat.
Yeah,
Da,
that's
da,
right.
da, I'm on a boat, right?
That is a surprisingly inappropriate song for a kid. Just so you all should know.
Yes,
Barnes, why didn't Barnes? Do you want to answer this
I did.
question or?
I did. I represented Kyle from February of this year up until a week before trial, and was told that I could that we would select the jury or would be heavily involved in it. Body language panel all agreed to help. A bunch of data people agreed to help. Several other jury consulting experts also agreed to help. It was a team of about 10 people. We'd also offered 10 or so people to help with the presentation of evidence at trial as well, including a wide range of experts across a wide range of relevant and pertinent areas. It was that first part had already been declined, but the agreement was we could have a major role in jury selection. And that was my focus because I believe this was a jury selection case. And then a week before trial, I was all of a sudden cut out entirely. And at the same time that I was asking questions about whether in fact the fundraising was actually going to Wendy Rittenhouse as I had been told it was, because there had been a multi-million-dollar lawsuit filed that I had received a copy of that alleged that that was not happening, that in fact the money was being diverted to the control of David Hancock. And at that point, all of a sudden, I'm persona non grata and pushed out of the case. Kyle was made unavailable to talk. Wendy was made unavailable to talk. All of it. All of a sudden, a corporate law firm is involved that appears to have ties to David Hancock. That's telling me they really represent Kyle. It's like there's a conflict there. I mean, it's a lot of shenanigans going on. And David Hancock has a lot of weird connections, weird, spooky connections. You can just look up David Hancock, Deep State Dave, stuff like that. And you'll find where people are documenting and detailing his very peculiar history and how he may be under criminal investigation for issues related to Puerto Rico. So that's who it is. The security guy controls everything related to the case because he controls the money. And you have a poor family, and he controls the family's physical security. So what do you
Yeah.
think is going to happen?
Well,
This
that
is
and
not a
that
family that knows the legal system, that's ever been through the legal system. And this is the guy that controls whether the grocery bill gets paid, whether one of the sisters' medical bills get paid. What do you think's going to happen? The guy's hijacked complete control over the family and their life.
and I was
But
going
I
to
did
say
everything. I did all that work for free, spent money out of my own pocket, did 6 figures plus of legal work, never billed Kyle a penny, nickel, dime, or dollar. So this was not about money. I had agreed to take a step back. The only thing I regret is now I would run roughshod. I would come in, make an appearance, force the issue, go whole hog. You have to be mean and vicious. I tend not to be in these situations. I want to work with people, try to let them if figure out what's their objective, try to meet their objective while also meeting the client's objective. Find a way you can unite the two and not create unnecessary conflict. Unfortunately, in some of these cases, you can't.
apparently the Rumble stream is down, and I got a notification through StreamYard, and I don't know. I don't think we broke anything on Rumble, but if we did, I'll take it as flattery. But Robert, I mean that's what I want people to appreciate is your time. And not your time. It's this is one thing about lawyers. People hate lawyers because how dare they charge $500 an hour for all they're doing is thinking. And I've never charged $250 an hour in my life, Canadian. But how dare a lawyer charge $500 an hour when all they're doing is just sharing their thoughts? It's knowledge acquired through decades of experience and refined knowledge. And when you say you value your time at 6 digits, and I have, Robert, I can evaluate our live stream times. It's a very easy, calculatable sort of function. Whatever your hourly rate is, however many streams we've done, everyone out there on the internet, that's your aggregate knowledge value of what you get from these streams, because it is what you get. It's 6 figures without a question. And I know you're relatively selfless in the sense that you're relatively selfless. And I know things that I don't discuss publicly, but when people ask these questions, and I'm glad you answered the question, it's not stuff that was withheld for personal gain, personal profit, or personal what's the word I'm looking for? Not
Aggrandizement. of any kind. If I wanted to be a grifter, if I wanted to make money, I would be a quiet tax lawyer and write my own checks until the day is long. Don't
Rob,
need the public attention, don't need the ego validation, had plenty of big cases, all of that. And went to great lengths. And some people ask, why didn't I recognize it sooner? It's a reverse version of confession through projection. Two reasons. One, I assume people are coming at this with good intentions that care about their client first and foremost. Unfortunately, you have to assume otherwise often these days, but I hate that mindset to have. But the second was I was directly assured that we would have a major role in jury selection all the way through. And I knew if we picked the jury, they could be the most incompetent rubes at trial, period. The facts were so overwhelming, we picked the right jury, it's going to be straight acquittals. People have now seen that in live time. That despite all the mistakes of defense, everybody was pretty much convinced that came into this with any objective view that wasn't prejudiced against Kyle. Even some people who came in prejudiced against Kyle, David Packman, others, reversed their opinion substantively on the key charges in the case after witnessing the evidence. If you had any degree of openness toward the evidence itself was so overwhelming that there was, because as you know, it was all videotaped. But even the state's own witnesses making critical admission after admission after admission in favor of Kyle on the stand, because that's what the facts are, that the only real risk here was jury selection. And I thought, as long as they gave me jury selection, I don't care about the rest. And they can even take credit for the jury selection. I won't say that we're doing it. I won't take a major public role in relationship to it. And then at the last minute, they pulled the rug out from under us. Maybe they never intended to do it. I don't know. I just know they unnecessarily put a kid at risk. And honestly, I never assume a lawyer will do that.
I'm gonna tell. I'll say one thing now. I'm smarter than Robert in one respect. I never trust anybody. It took me a long time to even trust Robert, or to assume that Robert was not. I don't know what I have to exploit in the world, but I'm skeptical of everybody, without exception, um, except my wife. She's proven to be the most trustworthy person on the face of the planet. Even my kids don't trust a thing they say. But Robert, and I'm saying it tongue in cheek, is that you
Sure.
had your expectation of what you thought this was about, and you imposed that on others. It's confession through projection, but not in the self-condemning way. It's more like in the, I guess it's self-condemning. You were naively thinking everyone was as altruistic or looking out for the interests of others. That maybe they are. Maybe this all ends well.
Yeah.
And
If it
but
ends well,
for
then I'm as happy as anybody. So and hopefully that still is the case. And again, I think there's still a very good chance that that is the case. But it was just unnecessary to be here to take this kind of risk because of people, whatever was driving them. But and for other younger lawyers out there, learn from this as well. You'd never live in such a bubble, never have such a big ego that you don't take advice and don't welcome feedback and don't welcome ideas. There's always going to be people that have other ideas. It's the confrontation of ideas that often leads to the best ideas. That's part one. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I always seek out opinions. I mean, when I'm thinking about a case, I talk to bartenders, I talk to waitresses, I talk to stewardesses, I talk to taxi cab drivers and Uber drivers. I talk to anybody about some aspect of it to see what are the feedbacks, what are the ideas. That's why I poll it extensively. That's why we do focus groups and mock trials. I mean, not like, don't do a long mock trial, do a short one so that it actually gives you information, doesn't confuse or contort the case. Because you recognize in this business, there's no way you're going to have a perfect insight into the case. And so borrow from other people liberally, and don't get caught in associating it has to be done my way. It has to be any of those things. And again, you can be the final decision maker if that's what you want. I used to work with a lawyer who was always obsessed with being the HFMIC, and you can get, or HMFIC. That's actually it.
hold on, HMFIC, the hot mother effer in charge.
Yeah, the head
Never,
MFR.
never heard it in my the head. Never heard it in my life. By the way, that's how that's my
Obsessed
strength
with
in
that.
life.
And I was always like, why do we got to do it that way? Let's just take everybody's feedback. Let's take care of everybody's advice. Let's let the best idea win. I mean, there's plenty of things that I would have other lawyers do in a case if the opportunity afforded me, because I'm skilled in some areas, not in other areas. So there are other people that would be better for particular witnesses, better clients, better certain cases, certain clients, certain adversaries, you name it. It's in my view, it's the devolution of the legal trade. There's always been ego. Ego's always been an issue. But look at how Johnny Cochran handled the OJ case. That is how you handle even huge ego defense lawyers. He did a brilliant, masterful job at putting everybody in the right place to maximize their skill set. He even kept F. Lee Bailey, who was infamously difficult to work with, directed and channeled. I mean, that's how. And why? Because Johnny only cared about winning for his client. Put that first, and everything else will come easy.
I want to bring up one which almost brought tears to my eyes, but it did actually. If anyone could see it, get the HD version. I'll drone ship to your place. I trust you to more than any person I don't personally know. I am a forever fan. Harmon Armin, thank you. And I was thinking, I said, there's nothing worse. There's no greater curse than not being trusted. And that only comes with having violated trust, because ordinarily your instinct is to trust. And when you violate a trust and you're no longer trusted, it's the greatest curse ever, because how long does it take to build up trust and a split second to lose it?
Yep.
And with that, I mean, like, Jesus, I mean, the prosecution, they are untrustworthy. They're liars. It's a foregone fact. And then the question is, why do you trust anything they ever say again in the trial? The judge has to be polite. He's got to be objective. The media is going to spin what they do the way they do. If the prosecution says it, they're government employees. They have to be, sincere and authentic and honest. But they are proven pathological liars, and they are quite clearly in the pursuit of and I said it before, it's not a prosecution when you disregard facts and evidence, it's a persecution. And they are clearly involved in a persecution of Rittenhouse. And just so nobody clips this out of context and says Viva was condoning what Rittenhouse did. The greatest tragedy of this entire thing is that Rittenhouse had to do what he did because the authorities did not do what they ought to have done. And they forced ordinary citizens, not just one or two, because even when I started this case, I thought Rittenhouse was one or two, maybe five, showed up with AR-15s. There were, Robert, am I wrong? Close to 100 people with AR-15s. I mean, at least we saw.
There were a lot of people with major guns there that night.
So we were led to believe this dude Rittenhouse, a crazy white supremacist lunatic who showed up to shoot black people, who ended up actually shooting 3 white people, one of which was a convicted pedophile. For anybody on the jury who's watching and shouldn't be,
he was defending minority, immigrant, women-owned businesses from destruction by people who were yelling the N-word at anybody they could that night.
I'm just waiting for someone, by the way, to meme a shoot me Binger, like shoot me Binger, and then put in Binger with his finger on the trigger, pointing it at the jury. Meme that, people of the internet, like Rosenbaum saying "shoot me Binger," and then Binger with his finger on the trigger. This is who you're dealing with. You're dealing with Binger defending Rosenbaum. And the fact that he was a convicted pedophile was not known by Rittenhouse at the time. But according to Krauss, the theory of the case, if you're being attacked by a lunatic who's attacking a guy with a gun, your sole cause for self-defense is to drop the gun and go fisticuffs. And that's oh, by the way, Robert, sometimes you just have to take a beating. And then you said, and I didn't even put it together, if anyone on that jury pool has been subject to domestic abuse, no gender, just anyone who's been beaten in their lives, might not agree with that.
Yeah. Anybody that's been bullied, anybody that's been threatened, it's not just people who've taken a beating, but people who've been bullied and threatened and did things they didn't want to do because of the threat of violence or force against them. So, I mean, that was, and again, I think the prosecution decided after watching juror reactions that their only chance was a mistrial to hold out, and they argued inflammatory evidence to their side of the aisle. And the mistake of the defense was not doing a jury selection that kept those people from being on the jury pool. And again, there were ways to do so, because it was about a third that were hardcore biased, and there was about a group of 17 questions we identified that would filter out pretty much all of them. Plus, when you have a week to do data dives before then you can get all that information and intel. So and what I'm encouraging is whatever, it's not bad grapes about this case. It's educational to everybody out there. Learn how to do this. If you're a lawyer, if you're part of a case, Learn the value of jury selection. Don't pretend your view of the case is going to be the jury's view of the case. Understand the value of polling beforehand. Understand the value of doing versions of mock trials, but limited focus groups. If you can't afford that, do it in your everyday life with everyday people as much and as often as possible, and do probing, meaningful jury selection. Learn about motivated reasoning. I mean, why do we have some of the body language people on? Why do we have some Scott Adams on? These people educate you about how people really think, including the key decision makers in your cases. And if you're going to be a better lawyer, if you're going to be, or just a better advocate in any part of your life, you need to learn these things and quit. Don't pretend, as Mark Richards did, that the jury will think about, or this judge did, that the jury will think like you do about the case.
And someone had just said, and let me just see if I can bring up that super chat. I don't know what IOLTA is, and I
So
just hope it's not
in the
bad.
States, it's interest on lawyer trust accounts.
Okay.
So they're separate accounts.
You know, he brought up an interesting factor about jury selection, and hopefully nobody's in a situation or gets into a situation where you have to actually take his advice. But he makes a valid point, a great point, and I just wanted to put that out there. So any questions, comments, just throw in chat, please.
That you set up that are trust accounts that are monitored by the state, and that you can't take the money out except under specific circumstances. I had proposed that option, and it was turned down by David Hancock.
No comment, but derive your own conclusions based on the defense now proposing a mistrial without prejudice, which would be very lucrative in theory for certain interests. Does anyone agree that the judge needs to be more tech savvy? If he was, we wouldn't be. No, I actually, Robert, tell me if I'm wrong. The judge knows more than he's letting on that he knows. He knows more than the prosecution does, but the defense is not seizing on the implied knowledge of the judge to let the defense know that he knows the prosecution is lying. Am I wrong?
Partially, almost all the judges, because of their generational standing, don't understand technology like we do, and definitely not the way younger people do. And so, because of that, it's important to now. What most judges do is they delegate that. They have a tech staff, particularly in federal court, and they let the federal and in federal court, none of this would have ever been allowed. And in most state courts, frankly, it would increasingly not be allowed. But in federal courts, none of this shit show, frankly, would ever come about, because in fact, before you're even allowed to introduce technological evidence, it has to clear a bunch of legal and evidentiary standards, but it also has to clear certain technical standards. You have to test it. You have to be trained in the court's technology. You have to work with the tech administrators. You have to make sure it's going to be flawless, and they get very agitated if it's not. But I mean, I've done cases in major state courts across the country, and at this point, they are they're, well, a little behind, but nowhere near where Kenosha is. But this judge was trying to upgrade the technological capabilities, and it's because they didn't have a tech savvy expert there. That's a quarter of the problem. Another quarter of the problem was not litigating these issues prior to trial, so the judge was educated and informed about it. Another problem was not having a video expert there throughout the trial, multiple ones that could explain these things and translate them. When Richard says he doesn't understand these things, I have no doubt about that. When I first used the words AI to Richards, he asked me, "What in the world is AI?" So that gives you an idea of his tech savviness.
Well, I've got my own acronym, my reflexive answer for AI, and I have a dirty mind, so I'm not even going to say it publicly. But I'm sure the chat can. What did I mean by AI? We'll see.
It won't be as bad as Rekida's chat.
You know what? For the AI, I think it would be fitting for Rekida's chat. and speaking of the glory of Rekida's chat, it's glorious. I mean, you
Oh, it's
don't have
great to
to.
see him blow up. It's great to see people introduced to Andrew Branca, Law of Self-Defense. I highly recommend his book. It's very good, useful for people. He also knows the best self-defense associations where you can really get an equivalent of legal insurance for any risk you may face down the road. It's great to see the exposure for, Good Logic, Uncivil Law, Nate the Lawyer, Legal Bites, Legal Mindset. All of them have seen their channels really dramatically explode because Nick's channels exploded. Great idea of Nick to put meaningful legal commentary.
Boy, I can see chat came up with some interesting options as to what AI meant. Holy moly, my nerves. Oh my.
with an ongoing trial of high profile interest. That's incisive interest. That's not the incisive insight. That's not the kind you're going to get from conventional opinion. That, there's cross section. I was on Tuesday Night Tights with the Geeks and Gamers last night, because this matters to everybody everywhere. This is about the core rights of self-defense in America, the core ability of you as an individual to protect your own liberty, to keep your body inviolate. We're seeing that in multiple contexts right now in the law. Do I own my own body or not? Can I protect my own body or not? Can I defend my own body or not? And I think this case strikes a deep chord. Also, you're seeing one of the most clear-cut cases of pure innocence put on trial for his life that you'll ever see in America. And so I think that's another reason for the interest. And credit to Nick for increasing public attention to this case, giving a platform for incisive insight so that people can get meaningfully self-informed, meaningfully self-educated, and thus self-empowered about the entire legal system. A lot of people on the right waking up. I was on with Michael Malice about this. I think he'll be up today or tomorrow, about the importance of waking up about problems in our judiciary, problems with our prosecutors, problems with our police officials, that they're making questionable, problematic decisions that put the most innocent people imaginable at risk for the most moral and justifiable acts possible. And more people that wake up to this, the more they realize that they need to lobby the court of public opinion. Just as the election fortification, they use a different F word when I was growing up to describe this election, but election fortification woke up a lot of people to the problems in our election system. People are starting to wake up to the problems in our criminal justice system. And I think that's great for the long-term health of our public criminal justice system, is more people involved, engaged to make reform and change to take place.
And I
that's
do
thanks
not.
to Nick Rekieta has helped do that substantially.
I gotta say, like, there's no. It's an amazing thing what Rekieta has done. The exposure he has given to other people who have been existing on the interwebs for a while, but have not gotten this level of exposure. It's a net positive, period, all around, because now people are discovering new outlets, new sources of information for unadulterated, I guess is the word to say. It's amazing. I guess the question is this: while I choke on my own tongue, what do we expect tomorrow? What do we expect for the week? And where do we go from here?
So if you continue to have a jury conflict, and there's some concern that basically there's especially 3 to 4 women on the jury.
Okay, folks, this was recorded last night. It was live last night. So here we are the following day. Let's see what he's predicted is going to happen, knowing Thursday's today. It's just passed. Friday's tomorrow now. Let's see what he says.
Who were described by some journalists there as Karen-type personalities, mask wearers, people who came from, one of them may have been an older female professor, came from old Yankee ancestry, that if you understood the politics there, if anybody's from Chattanooga, it's like if they came from multiple families of Lookout Mountain. You knew to not, if you knew in Chattanooga and you got a class divide in a case.
Also, I got to add another thing. You notice here in chat, somebody says left Binger, who's the prosecutor, and the right Richards, who's, I guess, the defense lawyer. What is this fixation with left and right? There's varying degrees of this and that. Let's get rid of this left and right and create, we're creating duality and division just by positioning people's left and right. I can understand in a few situations that's necessary, but this is purposely done. So let's let this left and right go.
Not to put someone from Lookout Mountain on that jury trial. Now, at least not from the Chattanooga part of Lookout Mountain. The Georgia part, there's some different folks.
I'm gonna guess about 17,000 people right now have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm sure. So this is just the Chattanooga folks. But the but it's the same dynamic that there's 3 or 4 of them. One of them may even be the forewoman. And so what you would expect to see tomorrow, typically the way they've gone about things, they haven't asked questions, but it sounds like the leaders on the jury may be the ones pushing for conviction, but that the majority is for acquittals. If that is in fact the case, what you can anticipate tomorrow is more requests, either maybe if they're still conflicted, probably you'll start seeing some questions. And don't misinterpret the questions. The questions might sound like, oh man, those sound like conviction oriented questions, but it may be because the leaders on the jury are still a minority trying to force the others into their side, and they're the ones behind asking of the question. So the way it's progressed, first they asked for self defense instructions, then they asked for all the jury instructions. Then they said they were going to look at some videos. Then they looked at a bunch of videos, including the drone footage. That sounds like a few jurors trying to argue to the other one, see why we're right, and that their arguments are not working. And the question is, how long do they hold out? How committed are they? How much do they badger everyone else into trying to change their mind? Are they willing to try to do a compromise verdict instead? Or do they capitulate? Because the thing with a lot of those authoritarian kind of personality types, and the defense had a misguided notion that those would be helpful jurors, which was wrong. And that was explained to them, but they may have put them on anyway. Is that they have difficulty being rejected by a majority of people. They like to believe that their opinions are not only the correct opinions, but that everybody reasonable shares them. And when people don't, they almost have a cognitive dissonance moment. And then they often capitulate and go home. But hopefully, Kyle has some hardcore people committed to him no matter what. So they won't allow convictions to occur, won't allow compromise to occur. And then secondly, hopefully he has some hardcore people that are leaders for him. And if that's the case, then it'll go back and forth, and you may see a range of questions that may sound confusing throughout the day tomorrow and the next day if it's a holdout jury. If they do not have a verdict by end of business on Friday, you're likely looking at a likely hung jury. If they're going to come back with acquittals or a compromise verdict, that will likely happen later tomorrow or early Friday.
Okay, what I will love is that I looked at it the exact opposite way, that you have the majority trying to convince 2 holdouts to acquit. But I appreciate what you're saying right now is because someone has to take the jury for person, so I don't get
Because they
canceled.
pick that person before they vote. The first vote they make is the 4-person vote.
That's amazing.
So they don't know what the 4-person believes at the time they make him 4-person.
But the
And if it's
person
an
most
old Yankee aristocrat who's used to running Kenosha for family from generations, if it is someone like that, that's the rumor. I don't know if it's true. Then they would fit. And if they're like an older female maternal professor type, the type of person that loved running around with COVID mania fear for the last year, telling you what to do, and oh my God, why isn't your kid with 3 masks? That kind of personality that hyperventilates when you get on the plane without a mask.
but stop it there. Apparently, that video was totally fake, which I thought it was fake to begin with. But that video of the person freaking out about breathing oxygen of the person, apparently that was fabricated. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure that video was, but I'm referencing. I've seen this. I've seen people freak out. It's just insane. I've seen stewardesses freak out. Oh, you know, while you're sleeping, they grab your mask and stick it over your face, and it's like
someone touches my face when I'm sleeping. It'll be a bad incident, but I say that as a joke. I'm not a big man. Someone touches my face when I'm sleeping, I'll apologize for them touching my face. But Robert, so it's an interesting thing: is who is going to take the role of the jury 4-person? It's going to be someone who's proactive, someone who's ready to do it, which by and large would not be, if I'm wrong, would not be someone who's ready to acquit, but rather someone who's ready to convict and activist to begin with.
Yes, right. Exactly. And if they think they're leaders for the community, to the super chat question, their excuse may be fear of public reaction of full acquittals, but it's not their motivation. Their motivation is they came in presuming him guilty and believe their job is to lead the lynch mob. They don't want to see that as what they're doing, but it is in fact what they're doing. So it depends on the rightness and righteousness of the jurors who know Kyle is innocent to stand up for it and do their constitutional and perform their oath of their office, because that's what this is now as a juror, and acquit him as the law compels.
We're going to end it with this because I think we've exhausted the discussion of the evening. I think Eric Hunley is going live with news with
booze.
Is it booze with news or news with booze?
News with booze.
It's News with Booze. Eric Hunley, people, was one of the
Unstructured
panelists.
podcast.
Unstructured. He's amazing. Robert, we will undoubtedly find ourselves on Ricada at some point tomorrow. And may there be, I would say, good news. I
I'll
don't
be
want to
probably
say,
on a little less. I got a lot of work tomorrow.
and that was the other question is, when do you sleep? When do you work? But we know you do both, because you do both, and you are not just a human, you are a superhuman as far as it goes in the legal world. So, Robert, I'll represent on Ricada stream. Just message me what I have to say to look smart, and we'll be good. Everyone. So tonight, News with Booze. Eric is going live. I think now he's like 3 minutes into it. Tomorrow, I'll be on Ricada. If I'm those kids are going back to school, whether they like it or not, and they're not sick. They just cough and sneeze. They're going back to school because Daddy needs to have a life and whatever. What do we expect? It's Thursday tomorrow, so what do we expect for the rest of the week? If there's no
Okay, folks, as soon as these guys finish, which is going to be really soon, we're going to go for a 15-minute break, okay? So as soon as this video finishes, within a minute or two, we'll go to a 15-minute break, okay?
verdict, one way or the other, by Friday, we expect the judge to say hung verdict, hung jury.
I don't think he would. I think it would only be if the jury came back and say we're irreconcilably conflicted. And if it's the kind of jury foreman that I'm talking about, they might not say that. They might come back the next Monday.
My goodness, can you imagine? By the way, I'm not going to say this to be cynical. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that these jury members are not reading, listening, or discussing the file right now. The snowball's chance in hell.
Well, the other thing is, I can't imagine them going through Thanksgiving. I can't imagine. There'll either be mistrial or verdicts by next Wednesday.
When is American Thanksgiving? Because we in
Next
Canada
Thursday.
we have
A week from tomorrow.
Okay, fine, we agree.
I'll be back in the fine state of Tennessee for that.
I won't. Do I ask why? I shouldn't ask why. I don't know why. If I know that I shouldn't ask a question, I shouldn't ask it. Why, Robert?
Oh, for family Thanksgiving.
Okay, fine.
I'll be at,
I thought it was
my nephew Sean is a really good cook. He's also a pastor most of the time, but a really good cook. So I make it back. And then my brother-in-law usually cooks some too, and he's a really good cook. So between both of them and catch up with the kids and everybody else. I got tons of nieces and nephews, all ages.
And we got the real Bambuga in with a joke. Hung jury. Wait, they're all dudes. I say there's a number of ways to. I don't like the term hung jury. Period. I don't like using it, which you might realize I don't use the term. I will say an undecided jury. But yeah, Robert. Okay, amazing. So we'll see what tomorrow holds. What do you expect for tomorrow in particular? Like what happens tomorrow?
I think if I'm right about things that it will probably go another day.
Ugh.
But I'm hoping for acquittals by Friday morning. That's what I'm hoping for.
All right, good. I'm going to end with this. Thanks, guys. Phenomenal. We are phenomenal, Robert. We not just that, you're phenomenal, and I suck off your phenomenalness to leech out a bit of my own phenomenalness. Okay, so vivabarneslaw.locals.com is where you can find us on Locals. Rumble is the other place. Here, Robert has been popping into Ricada's stream, and just to give the other lawyers props, Robert, if I forget someone, let me know. You've got Legal Bites Alita. Oh, sorry, go for it.
I'll say one addendum. Eric Hunley, Unstructured, I believe, is going to have the behavior panel on tomorrow. They were on recently on Dr. Phil, and people can listen to their advice and ask yourself, would I like those people to help me pick a jury? Would I like those people to help give me insights on a witness? Would I like those people to help me prep for a jury? That's what Mark Richards turned down. But more importantly, think about that for your future cases. If anybody out there knows a case, has a case, is a lawyer, is involved with it, this is the kind of expertise you should start to tap into, because these guys are fantastic. But you can see another interview with them with Eric Hunley tomorrow on his Unstructured show.
All right, and do it, because they are amazing. Hunley's amazing. Joe Neerman, Good Logic. Alita, Legal Bites. Andrew, Legal Mindset. Oh Jesus, Hoag's Law. You've got Ian Runkle, who is also on the panel.
Runkle of the Bailey.
Runkle of the Bailey, but who else am I forgetting? I'm forgetting a ton of people right now.
There's a guy. There's a Matt. There's obviously Good Logic. Maybe you already mentioned him.
Yeah, Uncivil Law.
Law.
The legal verse, the lawyer verse of YouTube is exponentially growing. but you'll see them and you'll decide who you want to follow and you'll decide who you want to listen to. But listen to everybody because knowledge is power, even if you disregard it. So with that said, people, I'm gonna just close it. Oh, News with Booze is live now. So when you leave here, there's a lot of people. Go check out News with Booze. Robert, stick around. We'll say our proper goodbyes. Everyone in the chat, thank you very much. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the super chats, but I appreciate it. And let's keep this momentum going. Sunlight is the greatest disinfectant, and we are shining a big, bright Robert Gruler. We are shining a big, bright spotlight of sunlight on the world. With that said, everyone, peace out.
Okay, folks, we're going to go to the next video now. And I'm just going to... No, I can't pull it up quick enough, I guess. But any questions or comments, just throw in the chat and let me know what you think, please. We're going to roll her now.
Litigator turned YouTuber, and this is Winnie the Westie on my right-hand side today, because when I put him on my left in today's lighting, it makes for some bad lighting. All right, well, there has been some updates in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. While we are waiting for the jury to come down with a verdict, they have been in deliberation now for 1 day, going on 2. The defense filed a motion for mistrial with prejudice on November 14, citing some events that occurred during the trial. I got a copy of the motion to dismiss with prejudice.
It is very well put.
And I've got to say that after reading the motion to dismiss with prejudice and after having seen what went down during that trial, any remaining benefit of the doubt I was ever inclined to give to Binger and Krause in terms of a just and lawful prosecution no longer exist. State of Wisconsin, plaintiff versus Kyle Rittenhouse, defendant. Motion for mistrial with prejudice. Comes now the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse, appearing specially by his attorneys Mark Richards and Corey Shirafisi upon all the files, records, and recordings heretofore, and herein respectfully moves this court for entry of an order granting a mistrial with prejudice. As grounds for this motion, the defendant asserts the following. What I find truly amazing is that in all of the articles on this motion to dismiss with prejudice, none actually link to the document itself. The only article I found that contained any sort of image of the motion itself was in the Daily Mail. This is a picture of the motion. It's not a PDF. It's not an electronic version, so the quality is not all that good, but I went ahead and tried to enhance and sharpen the image, and lo and behold, when I did, this is what I saw. Hardy har har. Okay, jokes aside, let's get into the motion because it raises a number of very, very serious issues, very serious alleged prosecutorial misconduct in the context of this trial, and the world deserves to know exactly what happened. On August 18, 2020...
Okay, so this is an actual copy of the motion filed by the defense, which are the attorneys representing Kyle Rittenhouse.
21, the state filed a, quote, second other acts motion, end quote, seeking to admit evidence regarding a video showing the defendant sitting in a vehicle having a discussion regarding what he would like to do to people he believed were looting. The other acts motion was heard along with additional, quote, other acts motions, end quote, filed by the state on September 17, 2021. Notes from the CCAP indicate the court was, quote, taking under advisement with a bias against admitting the evidence, end quote. The state did not file a motion for reconsideration of any of their motions. More simply put, for those of you out there who may not really understand exactly what's going on right now, and I say that without judgment because it's not entirely clear, it's confusing even to someone with legal training. Basically, the state had filed a motion to admit other evidence into evidence, alleged events that occurred before the incident in question, that being the night of August 25th. They wanted to admit that evidence in order to show what they argued it would show as relates to the character of the defendant. The other acts that the state wanted to admit into evidence involved Kyle Rittenhouse allegedly in a car, and they wanted to argue that it showed whatever they wanted to argue that it showed, but the judge took it under advisement with a bias against admitting the evidence, and that basically means the judge says, look, I'm going to think about it, but my first inclination is to not allow it as evidence. And what does the prosecution try to do? When Kyle Rittenhouse decides to take the stand, Binger decides to try to get this evidence into evidence, notwithstanding the judge's taken under advisement with a bias against admitting this as evidence, and I think we're going to call this
The Binger Dinger.
But before we get into the Binger Dinger on the other acts evidence, Binger tries to pull another fast one as relates to the defendant's Fifth Amendment rights. On cross-examination, the state asked the defendant, quote, since August 25, 2020, this is the first time you told this story, end quote. The court sustained the defense objection. Shortly thereafter, the prosecution stated to the defendant that he sat through the trial, had an opportunity to watch videos played in court, had the opportunity to listen to testimony of all 30 witnesses that testified, and after all that, now you are telling your side of the story. The court dismissed the jury to admonish Binger, the prosecution, because what the prosecution was basically doing here was effectively violating Kyle Rittenhouse's right to remain silent, his Fifth Amendment, by purporting to use his silence against him when he chose to testify. The court unequivocally told Binger that he was either over the line already or right up to it, and they wanted to avoid any further problems going forward. They called the jury back in, and what does Binger do? He again crosses that line. Then, after being warned about post-arrest silence, the state violated the court's order regarding the admission of, quote, other acts evidence, end quote, by asking the defendant, quote, you have previously indicated that you wish you had your AR-15 to protect someone's property, end quote. The court again admonished the state for violation of the previous court order. There's an old expression that all is fair in love and war, and I like to say that all is fair in love and litigation, except this is the prosecution who is, in theory, out for justice and not out for conviction, but Binger and Krause are definitely, quite clearly, unequivocally out for nothing but a conviction, and here Binger has violated two fundamental rules. One is the right to remain silent, and Binger was quite clearly trying to hold Kyle Rittenhouse's right to remain silent against him in front of the jury, and the other was violating a court order which took under advisement Binger's motion to admit evidence of other acts evidence, that being the alleged video of Rittenhouse in a car saying whatever he said. Binger violated two very fundamental rules. One was a constitutional rule, and the other was an order of the court. And Binger did this in front of the jury without asking the judge's permission, without forewarning the judge that he was about to do it, and he was rightly admonished by the judge, and the defendants rightly made a motion for mistrial with prejudice at that time on that basis. The defendant moved for a mistrial with prejudice. The court indicated that it would take the motion, quote, under advisement, end quote. After lengthy comment, the prosecutor then stated, quote, I thought, my good faith belief, you had left the door open a little bit, now we had something new, and I was going to probe it, end quote. The court responded, quote, I don't believe you, end quote. This is a particularly important allegation because from what I understand of the situation and the law in the United States, and bear in mind I am a Quebec Canadian attorney with no expertise in American law, I just talk to a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me and gather their knowledge and information. This allegation is particularly important because when you go for a mistrial with prejudice, evidence that is relevant to granting the motion for mistrial with prejudice is the bad faith of the prosecuting attorney, and here the judge is basically saying, I don't believe you, which is evidence of the bad faith of the prosecuting attorney, Binger.
The Binger Dinger.
And as if this would not have been enough on its own to justify at the very least filing a motion to dismiss with prejudice, it turns out the prosecution did more things that would justify a motion to dismiss with prejudice, that being concealing potentially exculpatory evidence from the defendant himself. On November 5, 2021, the fifth day of trial on this case, the prosecution turned over to the defense footage of a drone video which captured some of the incident from August 25, 2020. The problem is the prosecution gave the defense a compressed version of the video. What that means is the video provided to the defense was not as clear as the video kept by the state. The file size of the defense video is 3.6 megabytes and the state's is 11.2 megabytes. Further, the dimensions on our video are 480 by 212, the state's 1920 by 844. The video which was in the state's possession wasn't provided to the defense until after the trial concluded. Just let that sink in for a second. The prosecution fails or neglects to turn over evidence to the defendant until the fifth day of trial, and even when they do it, after the fifth day of trial, they turn over lower quality evidence that they themselves keep in their possession. In most jurisdictions, trial by ambush is no longer permitted, and what that means is you wait until trial to ambush your adversary with a slew of evidence that you had not communicated to them prior to the trial. Well, in prosecuting a defendant,
This is even more of a no-no.
agree or disagree, although I strongly suggest that everyone should agree, defendants, even the most hated of defendants, nonetheless have certain fundamental constitutional rights that need to be respected in prosecution, and one of those rights is not withholding potentially exculpatory evidence from the defendant during a prosecution. And here, in addition to violating Kyle Rittenhouse's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, in addition to violating a court order which did not allow the admission of certain evidence that the prosecution then sought to admit without the permission of the court, it seems that the prosecution had actively withheld potentially exculpatory evidence from the defendant, only communicated to the defendant lower quality image of that particular evidence, and then only after the trial had concluded communicated the higher quality video image to the defendant. I am no U.S. criminal attorney, but if that does not justify a mistrial with prejudice, I don't know what does. Ordinarily, where mistrial is granted on the motion of the defendant, it is presumed that defendant has made the election to abandon the valuable right of being tried before a
People, we're going to do a pause here. And we're going to go to a video. So This video will be some recorded video from the night in question, August 25th, at the very night Kyle Rittenhouse ended up shooting a few people. So if you have any questions, just throw in chat and comment, please.
Away from the fence and out of the park. At this point, a line of police officers came out in front of the gate and slowly advanced and cleared the park, dispersing the protesters out into the neighboring streets. At a gas station a few blocks away from the courthouse, an argument broke out amongst a group of heavily armed young men and protesters. Earlier in the evening, I had a chance to talk to the armed men, and they described themselves as a self-made militia that had come together over Instagram to protect protesters and property. Among the self-described militia was a 17-year-old with a green shirt and a long rifle. We would later learn his name is Kyle Rittenhouse. A short time after this argument, I heard several gunshots fired about a block away from the gas station. Cell phone video shows someone who appears to be Rittenhouse hurrying away with a gun while a man is left lying on the ground with what looks like a gunshot wound to the head. I saw the same person run past me with 2 or 3 men chasing him. He stumbled and fell to the ground before moving into a seating position and aiming his rifle at the men pursuing him. As he began firing, I ran for cover, and when I could see the street again, 2 men were laying on the ground. One of them was not moving.
He was not breathing. His eyes were rolled back in his head.
Are you okay? Hey, are you okay? Hey.
That guy looked dead. I mean, they were almost stripping him and didn't see no shots anywhere. So trying to feel the pulse on his neck. He did not have no pulse. So I just like, hey, roll him over and just started doing CPR because that's the only thing I could think of doing.
Did you get a response from that?
No. I never run towards trouble, but geez, that guy, he looked like he needed help.
We're still piecing together the events of the night, but in the end, 3 people were shot and 2 have since died from the shooting.
Hey, where?
Single tribunal. However, a different rule applies when the mistrial motion is induced by prosecutorial, quote, overreaching, end quote. In such a case, it is asserted the constitutional prohibition against double jeopardy will bar retrial. More simply put, what is being said here is that ordinarily when the defendant makes a motion for mistrial, in theory, even if it is granted, they can be retried unless the mistrial results from prosecutorial overreaching or, as it is otherwise known, prosecutorial misconduct. The following elements are required in order to bar retrial of a defendant who moved for and obtained mistrial due to alleged prosecutorial overreaching. 1. The prosecutor's action must be intentional in the sense of a culpable state of mind in the nature and awareness that his activity would be prejudicial to the defendant. And 2. The prosecutor's action was designed either to create another change to convict, that is, provoke a mistrial in order to get another, quote, kick at the cat, end quote, because the first trial is going badly, or to prejudice the defendant's rights to successfully complete the criminal confrontation at the first trial. Now, I don't know if that's a typo because the expression I know is a second kick at the can and not a second kick at the cat. But if that is a typo, it's kind of a funny typo. Even if I don't like cats, however, I do not condone kicking cats. I do like cats, however, just not as much as dogs. Dogs are my animal of choice. The motion then goes on to explain how the prosecutor's overreaching as relates to the other act's evidence was indeed intentional, and I don't really think anybody can deny that the conduct was specifically intentional. As it relates to the compressed drone footage, the prosecution should be required to explain to the court why they did not copy the footage for the defendant with the same quality as their copy. The footage has been at the center of this case. The idea that the state would provide lesser quality footage and then use that footage as a linchpin in their case, and it is the very reason they requested and were granted the provocation instruction by the court. The failure to provide the same quality footage in this particular case is intentional and clearly prejudices the defendant. This record has bad faith on the part of the prosecutor. We know that because he attempted to inform the court of his good faith basis for asking questions regarding the inadmissible evidence and was told, quote, "I don't believe you," end quote. And then in order to flesh out further why the prosecution might be trying to provoke a mistrial to get a second kick at the cat, the defense goes over the prosecution's own evidence and explains how it doesn't exactly support their theory of the case, that Groskraut confirmed that the jump kick man did in fact put Kyle Rittenhouse's safety at risk, that Groskraut only got shot in the arm after he was holding a loaded Glock pointed at Kyle Rittenhouse, that the prosecution's own expert confirmed that Rosenbaum was holding the barrel of Kyle Rittenhouse's gun when he was shot. So they're saying maybe in light of all this terrible evidence for the prosecution, they're trying to provoke a mistrial to get a second kick at the cat, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that. The state has repeatedly violated instructions from the court, acted in bad faith, and intentionally provided technological evidence which was different from theirs. For those reasons, the defendant respectfully requests the court find, quote, prosecutorial overreaching, quote, existed, that overreaching was intentional and in bad faith, and hereby grant the defendant's motion for a mistrial with prejudice. That is the motion for mistrial with prejudice. Come to your own conclusions. I know that I have come to my own conclusions after having watched the entire trial in real time. Now, the jury is still deliberating on a verdict, so if the jury comes back with a unanimous acquittal, this motion for mistrial with prejudice becomes academic. But if the jury itself is a hung jury, well then I think this motion for mistrial with prejudice will be granted by the judge. Especially if it is true why certain jury members are holding out on an acquittal because they fear for their safety or they fear for the backlash. If that turns out to be the case, I see no doubt that the judge will indeed grant this, because above and beyond everything that is alleged in this motion, the outside pressure and harassment and threats and intimidation to the jury itself could justify a dismissal with prejudice. And with that, I am going to return being glued to my computer awaiting a verdict. If you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
My Homer is not a communist.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. Robert Barnes and I do weekly streams every Sunday. We do weekly streams with a guest every Wednesday called The Sidebar. If you want to find us and support us on Locals, you can find us at
vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, so you can catch me there. But more important than anything, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah! Actually, one important
Oops. Listen, forgot something at the very end here. So I thought I'd better include it because you're going to see something coming up right away here.
piece of information before ending this vlog. It is developing news, so it's subject to change. It relates to the infamous jump.
Okay. So this here, I want to make a point here. This was after the Rosenbaum incident, and then we're going to 2, 3, and 4. So here's right after the first guy came up behind Kyle Rittenhouse, whacked him in the head with a rock, caused his hat to obviously fall off, went to the ground, and then jump kick man here came in, hit him in the face so hard, turned him 180 degrees. So for a guy that everybody claims was indiscriminately going out looking for targets and shooting people, That's the wrong impression. That's not what I've seen. What I've seen was the victims, or the people that were the victims, I think they were the aggressors, and they created the situation. So they were the instigators. They were chasing after Rittenhouse, who had his back to them like a wolf chases a rabbit or a baby deer. So this here you can see right for yourself what he was subject to and why he ended up shooting. Otherwise, he may have ended up dead himself.
Kick Man. Jump Kick Man was the unknown, unidentifiable individual who was seen jump kicking Kyle Rittenhouse to the head as he fell to the ground. Apparently, this unidentifiable individual was identified yesterday by a news outlet. What is shocking is not that the individual was identified and apparently has a lengthy criminal record. Apparently, Jump Kick Man was known to the prosecution. Either the prosecution approached him or he approached the prosecution and said that he would testify in this trial if the prosecution gave him immunity on current charges that he was facing. And the prosecution said, no, we're not going to give you immunity on those charges, so Jump Kick Man could not be called to testify. Now, this is not only obviously clearly prejudicial to the defendant, this might mean that the prosecution yet again lied to the court, because unless I'm mistaken, I'm fairly certain the prosecution warranted to the court that they did not know the identity of the infamous Jump Kick Man, and if it turns out that they did, regardless of whether or not it is in fact prejudicial to the defendant, and I think most of us would agree that it probably would be, it might seem that the prosecution overtly lied yet again to the court, and I suspect Judge Schroeder will not very much appreciate that. So, to be continued, to be developed, and if it turns out to be true, I suspect the motion for dismissal with prejudice will be amended to add this new and highly prejudicial information to evidence further bad faith of the prosecution, but that is where we stand right now, so now it's a real peace out. Peace out.
So there you go again. You see another example of how the facts have been misconstrued with the intent of creating a different portrayal of events that evening other than what had originally transpired. I want to leave that with you. And furthermore, yipperdoodle, and furthermore, I would like to thank you for joining us here today. And it was an honor being able to show what we could show for you. And I'd like you to know we're coming back live tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a big day. And either tomorrow we're going to get a conviction, an acquittal, a hung jury, and that's the deal, folks. So we're going to be live again tomorrow. So once again, thank you. Be safe. Be good. Michael J. over and out, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, folks.